Crowley's dilemma over how to give his prospective daughter an edge against hunters, angels and the eventual magical morons was something he debated on for several months. Until he heard Mephistopheles bitch and moan about how his new rider screwed the pooch deliberately and told him to go bugger himself after he told the man to retrieve the old contract from the previous one. Johnny Blaze was officially Crowley's favorite ghost rider, because he had pissed off that old demon beyond belief and off those morons that followed Blackheart, along with the blowhard brat himself. The brat was beyond irritating to listen to, always shooting his mouth off about how he would take over his father's place and rule hell. Hardly anyone took him serious because those with half a brain could tell he was all talk, no real power. The only reason none of the real players had offed him was because of the fact he was more Mephistopheles' headache and not theirs. If he had moved against, say, Lilith or Alistair, he would have become a stain in hell, and he damn well knew it. Still, hearing the older demon bitch about Blaze gave him an idea. He could turn Helen into the rider, one without the annoying angel to go with it. Everyone knew where Lucifer's grace had fallen, but heaven left it alone because it would be needed once he took his true vessel. Well, that, and by the time it was found Lucifer had already created Lilith, and now demons guarded it around the clock. Demons who kept angels, hunters ... anything that wasn't a demon really ... far, far away. So it was doubtful anyone would care if he just happened to be in the area. Odds were he could word his little trick as a way to ensure the younger Winchester fell and said yes to Lucifer. After all, he might be more inclined to trust a witch than he would Ruby, who was the one chosen to seduce him. Especially since he was going to train Helen to not rely on her magic like nearly every other European-bred witch. Besides ... that way no one will ask why Helen was on the list of people they couldn't possess and keep the angels from getting their mitts on her at the same time. Helen, read the contract over. You really couldn't live in the house with a crossroads demon without at the very least learning how to read and speak Latin as easily as English. The bare bones of the thing was that she had double the usual amount of time to collect Riddle's soul, and preferably Dumbledore, but she mostly needed Riddle, in exchange for being magically adopted as Crowley's daughter and to keep the powers he was going to give her once she reached 11. The contract wouldn't take hold until he gave her the powers, but the adoption just needed her blood and signature to be complete. The goblins had agreed to seal the adoption once they had that, if only so they could royally piss off Dumbledore and the Ministry the second they realized their precious poster girl wasn't under their control anymore. Well, that, and it always paid to keep a demon like Crowley on their good side, but mostly it was to piss off the Ministry and Dumbledore. Wait, what is this? The one loophole that keeps Lilith from getting on my ass later. Considering how close you are to the Hellhounds, I have very little doubt that you couldn't catch this idiot in 10 years. You're already 10 times smarter than the idiots running the place. All you have to do to fill your end of the deal is get the pieces the bastards scattered around Europe and you get to keep the nifty powers I'm handing over. Helene gave him a flat look. So basically it's sink or swim once I turn 11. Oh no. I'm not sending out a newly created rider who's too young to actually ride anything without getting busted by cops once the sun came up. Too much of a headache. Which is why once you get the powers we are going to be spending a few years teaching you how to use the damn things. And after having to listen to Mephistopheles bitch about how his riders have issues controlling their spirit after the first decade, I'm making sure yours will be added directly to your magical core. I have only one question about the rider. Do I get to blow things up? The rider is always enveloped in flames. I think fire affinity is a guarantee. And don't think I didn't notice you burning things in your room, said Crowley flatly. Helen didn't look even remotely ashamed for burning random crap in her room. It wasn't like the demons cared so long as she didn't burn herself in the process. The girl considered this. So ... I can cause massive collateral damage with my fireballs and escape before anyone finds out my identity? She asked. Crowley smirked. By the time we're done with you, "You'll be giving hunters heart attacks when they find out you're in the same state," said Crowley. The unholy cackle Helen let off actually sent a spark of fatherly pride in Crowley. After all, he was the one who originally taught her the fireball spell. Helen, age 11. It was her 11th birthday, and the official start of the contract. Well, actually it was when she finally signed the thing with a blood quill her father always kept on hand. Once the blood dried, she felt a surge of energy go from the paper into her magical core, which the lone demon witch on Crowley's payroll showed her how to use without those silly wands the European magicals seem to need. Derek was a nice man, but to be honest he was a bit of a klutz. It was almost impossible to believe he was someone who made an agreement with Crowley for magic, or that he was an actual threat. Probably why the hunters kept missing him. Well, that, and he kept a very strict eye on anyone coming to his town and usually left after leaving a few time-delayed hex bags behind that directed the hunter to people who had pissed him off enough. "Now we just have to wait until sunset and for the damp power to react to us," said Crowley. "Why?" "For some annoying reason Mephistopheles set the power to only activate at night, barring the rare rider who got enough control over the bloody thing to stay active. However, the power itself was severely weakened by light. I'm fairly certain it was because the old bastard is a known night owl who hated mornings," said Crowley offhand. "Plus everyone knows the rider goes after evil." "What if the rider's definition of evil is a bit skewed?" asked Helen. "It reacts to the darkness in the human heart." "Nothing's darker than a demon," stated Crowley flatly. Helen had to say it, no matter how much Crowley would be annoyed with her for it. "Unless you count the last time you tried to cook. Did we ever get that smell out of the kitchen where the oven used to be?" Crowley, despite being a demon, could not cook for the life of him. He had tried one memorable night to cook something for a snack out of boredom, and had nearly burned down the entire manor before they managed to get the flames under control. Never mind the mad scramble to keep it contained just to the kitchen. Helen had been torn between helping and making the situation worse. Either way, the incident stuck in her memory. The irony was that she was an excellent cook, but her adopted father's inability to make even an egg without setting the stove on fire was a running gag with the demons who worked under him. They called any minor incident of flames where they weren't supposed to be a Crowley. The second she said that, almost every demon, barring Crowley himself, started howling. Some were on the floor with tears in their eyes. "And to think, I was going to give you the present Alistair left once he heard my idea to get someone to track down all those overdue souls," said Crowley. Helen perked up. For some unfathomable reason, she and Alistair got along the same way. She picked up fire-based spells. To Crowley's open relief, this odd companionship did not extend to Lilith or her bitch Ruby. Either way, Alistair took a liking to Crowley's little hellion as he called her. So much so that he parted with no less than 4 of his prized hellhound pups, all from different pairings. Helen took one look at the Tyndallow's hounds, which Crowley couldn't get his hands on as they were extremely vicious unless you got to them early enough, and squealed like any other girl her age would around a normal puppy. "They're so cute." The 4 hounds would become massive when they grew up. The paws alone said that much. Each of them had slightly different coloring. Alistair had given Helen 2 sets of breeding pairs. Helen picked up the biggest one first. It had blood-red eyes and white streaks through its midnight black fur. The fangs along looked like they could rip a man's arm off. "I'll call her Lucy." She picked up the second female. This one was only marginally smaller than the first, but she looked twice as vicious. Crowley had raised a lot of hellhounds, and he could tell at a glance this one was even more vicious than the breeding female that Helen had bonded with shortly after moving into his house. Her fur was almost entirely black with red streaks along her legs. "This one I'll call Ally." Helen hugged one of the male pups. "I'll name Nick." He was stocky with dark ash-gray fur and was almost as big as an English bulldog, Despite only being recently weaned, he was going to be a monster when he was full grown. He was almost all muscle. Helen picked up the last pup. "You're Hermes," she said firmly. The smallest, but no less vicious, puppy barked, licking her face. It was the same color as dried blood, and clearly bred for speed above power. It was also going to be the smallest of the lot, if Crowley was any judge. "So we have Lucy, Allie, Nick, and Hermes. All right, I'll bite." "Where'd you come up with those?" asked Derek. "Lucy is short for Lucifer." Crowley choked back a laugh that his daughter had named her Alva bitch after an angel, despite the fact Lucifer was a boy's name. "Allie for Uncle Alistair, because she reminds me of him. Nick because one of the older names for the morning star once he fell was Old Nick '... and because he kind reminds me of Little Nicky. And Hermes because he was the fastest of the Greek gods, and known for his trickery." "I'll agree that the smaller female is like a bitch version of Alistair," said Crowley, "but when exactly did you watch that ridiculous movie Little Nicky?" Helen hooked a thumb at Dave. "He and the others were watching it for a laugh, and they didn't care if I joined in. Though to be perfectly honest, the idea of Satan knocking up a freaking angel that hasn't fallen is so ridiculous it's not even worth mentioning," said Helen. Every demon, and lone demon witch, snorted in agreement. That movie was an insult to hell. It was more comic relief than anything to anyone in the actual know of what hell was really like, especially the part about the main character being half devil, half angel. The angels would never allow such an abomination to exist, and if one did then it would have been either corrupted before the 1st century in hell or killed off. When the sun came down, Helen could feel something wake up. Her magical core, which had finally settled enough for her to actively start practicing magic, flared with a new power. Blue flames erupted from her skin, revealing bones underneath. Crowley couldn't help the pleased expression on his face. He knew adding it directly to her magical core was a better idea than having Helen fight the Grace for dominance. Mephistopheles was an idiot. "How come I don't feel like killing everyone?" she asked, her voice warped. "1. I only added the grace of the angel, not the angel itself. I'm not chancing you accidentally healing a fallen to the point where it could turn you against me. 2. You just now awoke the rider's power, meaning you have time to settle it in. I'm fairly sure the only reason you aren't trying to off us though is because you know we're your allies, not your prey," said Crowley flatly. Most of the crap the riders went through was because they had to fight the angel's consciousness, and the fact that it had been driven mad through repeated forced possessions. Helen spotted the owl, and blasted it out of habit. The birds were getting very annoying lately. Especially since they couldn't even get her name right. "Another one?" asked Crowley. She nodded. "That does it. If I see one more bloody owl across the property line I'm sending you to the pit to learn how to use that whip of yours for a month." Crowley had learned entirely by accident that thanks to the rider's powers, she could now follow him into the pit without any problems at all. So long as she kept up the blue flames, she could walk through hell without being affected in the least. However, if she stayed there too long without the flames, she had the bad habit of aging. On the plus side, she no longer looked several years too young. She should look 11 years old, yet after dropping the flames a few times while visiting her Uncle Alistair, something that had more than a few demons cracking up about, and wondering how the hell someone as bright and cheerful as Helen could call Alistair of all creatures uncle with a straight face ... and without being tortured for it, she now looked closer to 13. Crowley was dreading the day she hit her period for the first time. Even if it meant more protection from Lilith, who hated possessing anyone older than a prepubescent because she could cause so much more damage. The fact was Crowley had the worst suspicion that the second that cycle started his daughter would turn into a complete and utter rampaging bitch. And as hilarious as it would be to watch such a spectacle, it also meant he would have to deal with another headache he had more or less avoided because he insisted on homeschooling Helen. Dating. The mere thought of Helen dating anyone gave him nightmares.